Morning all. Excuse me. Don't know what's going on with the chat. I had some chat from Dan Cullen before the show actually started back at 9:51, and then nothing since. So, excuse me a second. We've got myself caught in cables. What the hell's going on here? Oh. Just talk amongst yourself while I stop myself from getting strangled. Morning, everyone. The chat's gone very weird. I don't know if anybody's watching or not. Well, no, I can see that people are watching, just nobody's in the chat. We had a bit of this yesterday, so hopefully that will spring into life. Feeling pretty chilled today. Obviously, it's a long weekend this weekend. Well, certainly it is here in the UK. It's is it May Day bank holiday? It's certainly a bank holiday on Monday, so no show now for another 3 days. No show Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. I'm going to go and put my feet up. I'm also planning, hopefully, to go and see the new Mission Impossible movie as well. Heard good things about it. I've liked all the others, so looking forward to seeing that. One of the other reasons I'm feeling quite so laid back, I had lunch with a friend of mine yesterday. He arrived here at noon yesterday for lunch. He left at 4:45. We had a 4.5 hour lunch. Lots and lots to talk about. But yeah, fantastic day. Listen, I'm a miserable old sod, and I don't like to mix with people generally. But when I do generally feel better for it. If anybody can type something in the chat just to prove that I'm not speaking entirely to myself, that would be very useful. I can see the numbers of viewers going up, but still nothing in the chat, which is very weird. Let me see if I can make it work. I've just pressed a button to say good morning to Ken Hatter, even though I have no idea if Ken's here. Nothing happening. That's going to make the rest of the show quite interesting, because we obviously have a question of the day. We also have a mystery machine. I'll press ahead just in the normal way, in the hope that this will resolve itself. But in the meantime, it's that time. So without further ado, I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this show on the road, even though it looks like several of the wheels have fallen off. Back after this. Then suddenly, people arrived. I don't know what's going on. I may have to shut the thing down and actually restart this whole thing. Dan Cullen, going back to there, that's at 10 o'clock. I didn't get it until 10:04, nearly 10:05. But morning, all plant addicts. Yes, morning to you, Dan. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Dan also says, "Are you ready, Chris? Fastest fingers first." Yeah, the two of them are head to head on the mystery machine, and we've got a bit of old school for you today. So keep an eye out for that. 2 days in a row. I wonder if apparently there's some update going on in the background. You see how the comments display. You see there. You see Dan's comment right there. Apparently they are working on a system whereby they will appear here, as like an overlay, which it looks quite nice in the demo I've seen. There's some work going on in the background with this system, and I wonder if that's causing us a few problems. Maybe it is. Jim Turner's here as well. Morning, Jim. Good of you to join us. I've already said good morning to Ken, purely to test the system, but he's here. Good morning, Ken. Who else do we have? We've got the question of the day there. And Dan saying, not long for me. Work tomorrow, home tomorrow evening, then back on the train Monday. Back here in Income Group Tuesday, all going well. Well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Good to hear. Yes, it is that time. Well, Dan, I'll come back to you, and you and I share a dislike of that word for many reasons. I'll come back to that in just a moment. I quite like Ken's offering as well. Well done, Ken. We'll be mystery machine. Let me do this first, shall we? Shall I? Here we go. Yeah, now the clock may be against Chris Ford. It may be against Chris Ford because I've not seen him in the chat, but here we are. We are at the point of revealing our mystery machine. And time and tide and the mystery machine on the Breakfast Show waits for no man. So here we are. That is a tiny, tiny bit of a machine I would like you to identify. What have you got on that? We're looking for both a make and a model, as always. Yeah, see what you can come up with. It's clues. It's not a current model, but it's certainly one that everyone should know, I would suggest. While you're worrying about that, did I post the question of the day? I did, because we've had answers on it. Let me remind you of that question of the day very quickly. Yeah. Now, I've just realised I'm doing the show entirely out of order. You'd think after 940 shows I'd know what order these things go in. I haven't even introduced the show today, so yeah, well, let's do this bit first and then we'll recap. Question of the day today is very, very simple. It's very straightforward, and I'm hoping to get some nice angry answers. We've already had a couple. The question, quite simply, is this: what word or phrase makes your blood boil? While you're thinking about that, let me tell you mine. I still write. I write articles and stuff for people, companies, industry professionals. I write articles, blog posts, social media content, sometimes even speeches as well. And to do that, I kind of need to get inside the mind of the person or the persons I'm writing for. Because they're other people's words and they're going to be presented by them, I analyse each word, each phrase, each sentence, and each paragraph to ensure that they convey precisely the message and tone that's required. And then, having sweat blood over it, I submit it to some fresh-faced oik in the marketing department, only for them to come back to me and say, "Oh, we love what you've done, but could you just? Nothing more likely to get my goat than that. Could you just? Hello, Mr. Shakespeare. Thank you for sending over that Julius Shakespeare thing of yours. We like it, but that friends, Romans, countrymen bit. Could you just, change the order a bit? What about you? What phrase gets your goat? What do we have? Okay, we'll do that in a moment. I tell you what, let me very quickly remind you of what the show entails today, because as I say, I've done it all out of order. It is Friday, the 23rd of May. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming. In today's show, Liebherr sets its sights on conquering the Australian mining sector. I'm going to be talking about the mining sector in Australia at the end of the show as well. Caterpillar's energetic outlook on the sites of the future. And Casey's click and dig function takes the strain out of repetitive tasks. Plus, in our latest look back at Bauma 2025, we're checking out the latest product offerings from Gehl, the skid steer loader people. Plus, in my morning monologue, who will speak up for you? Yeah, who will speak up for you? I am going to play the intro in just a second, but I do need to say good morning to Chris Ford, who has just arrived, somewhat late, somewhat tardy. Unforgivable, but I'm a forgiving type. I'm a benevolent live streamer. So morning, Chris, good of you to join us. Dan Cullen has guessed that our let me take Chris out of the way. He's guessed that our mystery machine could be an Atlas 360. It is not. Let me show you a bit more, and I do think this might actually come down to fastest finger first. Now that Chris has arrived, there you are. There's a little bit more. Anybody know what that might be? Keep those coming in. Keep those answers coming in. Here's the intro, and then we'll actually get on. No, I tell you what, let's skip the intro. Let's go to this. Yeah, we're off down under now with Liebherr, they're investing big in the Australian mining business. And when you see the figures, you'll understand why.
Liebherr are a family-owned business, first established in 1949. We are an innovative engineering and manufacturing company.
While Liebherr has experienced growth in the past, this time around is really driven and built off of a desire by our mining customers to decarbonize itself, and ourselves as strategic and key suppliers play a really formative role in assisting them in doing that.
We're translating the solutions that have been on the desktops of engineering resources around the world into actual field-based equipment.
So the Liebherr Australia growth is really predicated on a tripling of our machine population, our install base around Australia over the next 6 years through the end of the decade. This growth is going to allow us to make a major capital injection into our business to the tune of roughly $500 million between now and 2030.
Liebherr Australia is going through transformational growth. That includes a rapid expansion of our apprenticeship program. By 2030, we anticipate that we are going to triple the number of apprentices that we have within the mining division. By 2031, we anticipate our mining division's workforce to nearly double, growing from around 1,100 employees to approximately 2,000.
The growth opportunity that Liebherr Australia has at the moment means that we're going to have to increase our footprint right around Australia, none more so than here in Adelaide. Perth in particular is going to see an increase in our workshops and increase in our warehousing facilities. So too will be Mount Thorley and our Mackay branches that will all see the infrastructure footprint increase along with the growth.
It's fundamental to our success, making sure that our inventory is where it needs to be, when it needs to be for our customers.
In relation to our parts, we're going to probably double in size in terms of our parts and delivering parts to our customers, and looking about how we can manage parts more efficiently and effectively throughout the supply chain.
We're looking at bringing on additional resources and moving our warehouses into a 24/7 structure to better support our customers through the growth period. We're really excited to deliver over the next 10 years in line with new systems and technology to better support the supply chain.
So the growth in the reman area, essentially we need to triple our output by 2030. And that's going to involve a number of different things for the business. One will be expand our operations here in Adelaide, where we're currently at the moment, but also looking at operations in Perth, as well as expanding our existing infrastructure, but also reviewing our own internal processes so we can be more streamlined, more efficient, and deliver a better result to our customers and a quicker result as well.
Liebherr mining factories provide a wide array of products and support services to Liebherr Australia. Our commitment to Liebherr Australia's future growth is evident in several key areas. This all is underpinned by a considerable capex investment of close to $500 million. This is to ensure that we both together continue to deliver excellence in service and product availability to our end customers in Australia.
We have a wonderful opportunity in front of us. We've got a really detailed plan. We understand exactly how this is going to transition within our business and what we need to do. Our team are engaged and we actually really know what the future involves with it. It's going to bring an enormous amount of opportunity for us all, and we will deliver this together.
That, I think, is what you call ambitious. Triple in size in 5 years. Listen, if anyone can do it, Liebherr can. Now we do seem to have something of a consensus around our mystery machine. We've had, let me see, Jim Turner went for, where is he? There he is. No, that one there. He went for a Priestman Cub. It's not. Chris Ford went for the Priestman 120. Dan Cullen went for the Priestman 120. Jim Turner had a rethink and said not a Cub, a 120. Dan Cullen said a 120. Dan Cullen also said the Mustang 160. You're all wrong. You're all wrong. Yeah, I mean, you're pretty damn close, but you're all wrong. Here's a bit more. While you're figuring that out, I do need to say a very good morning to the mighty, the Welsh wizard himself, Ed Butler. Morning, Will. Ed, how are you doing, my friend? All recovered from Bauma? I'd like to think so. Hope you and the family are doing well. There's your mystery machine. We're looking for make and model. Lots of people have got close. Nobody has got the right answer as yet. Keep the guesses coming. While you're doing that, I'm going to do this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
I had a funny feeling that might happen. We have a winner. We have a winner. Let me show you what it is. It is one of these. That right there is a Priestman Mustang 220. Chris Ford got the right answer. I tell you what, Chris and and Dan Cullen are going really properly head to head at the moment. Let's just put the initials against that. So yeah, it's I think it's, I can't remember if it's 5-4 now to Chris or 6-5. Either way, I think he's just snuck back into the lead. Obviously, we've got a full week next week. Well, apart from the fact that we're not here on Monday, we've got 4 more episodes, and so it is going to go right down to the wire. Let me take this away, because Ed Butler says we did have the pleasure of operating the huge 400-ton Liebherr at Bauma. One ticked off the bucket list. Well, now you've done it, Ed. You see, and I realise you love the valleys and you love your family and everything else. But the Aussies are clearly expanding over there. I'm sure they'd welcome you with open arms. Maybe you could go to New South Wales. Maybe you'd feel, I don't know. I'm spitballing here, people. I don't know what I'm talking about. We're going to be back in a moment to talk about energy. I can't remember if I've done this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm in a bit of a state this morning, too relaxed.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Good to see Dan Cullen being magnanimous in defeat. Well, you beat me by a second while I was writing it in, but damn well done, Chris. Yeah, damn well done indeed. Yes, obviously, a lot of talk around the construction sites of the future relates to how we're going to power stuff. It will come as no great surprise to know that Caterpillar has got their finger on the pulse.
Welcome to Caterpillar's electrification journey, built on real-world customer experience and designed to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow's job sites. With insights gained from working alongside customers, we are shaping a vision for the future, where sustainability and productivity go hand in hand. Caterpillar's holistic approach to electrification is brought to life through our comprehensive ecosystem. Every element, from renewable power sources and energy storage systems to advanced charging solutions and electric machines, is designed to work seamlessly together. This fully integrated end-to-end solution not only helps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also ensures peak productivity and cost-effectiveness. The objective is to empower our customers with the transition to electrification operations with confidence. CAT machines and energy systems work in harmony, driving productivity while helping to lower emissions and optimizing tasks, from digging trenches to moving materials. CAT digital tools provide real-time insights into energy generation, storage, and consumption. This advanced platform empowers job site managers to improve operations, reduce downtime, and achieve measurable cost savings. More than equipment, our solutions help our customers achieve operational and sustainability goals. Caterpillar delivers actionable insights and technologies tailored to drive value and long-term impact. With Caterpillar's fully integrated electrification ecosystem, we're making the transition to sustainable operations seamless.
Good to know they've got that taken care of. I've just reposted that question today. We've already had a couple of answers on it, and we're looking for words or phrases that make your blood boil. Dan Cullen offered up, I detest the word bro. It boils my blood. For various reasons, I would suggest. Yes, me too. I'm going to display Ken's offering in this. I'm not going to say it because, YouTube get upset when I use this word. But yeah, I love using the word. Not a huge fan of being on the other end of it. I can give it, but I can't take. Sticking with Ken, sorry, here we go. Cat is pushing on with electric. And they're doing so quite quietly. Have you noticed that? Lots of people are making lots of song and dance about hydrogen this and hydrogen that, electric this and electric that. Caterpillar they're doing it in the background. Yes, we have electric wheel loaders. Yeah, we got those. Electric excavators. Yeah, we got those. We've got this covered. But maybe that's the Caterpillar way. I guess when you're multi-billion, biggest in the world, but maybe you don't need to shout too loudly from the rooftops. We are heading off to see Case in a moment. Click and dig. That's a thing. Back after this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
Before we get into the next bit of the, I'm going to show you this case thing in a moment. I've got one of these, right? This here is it's called a Stream Deck, okay? And I use it to basically, I pre-program a bunch of shortcuts on here. So stuff that I do on a regular basis, I've pre-programmed, so I just press a button. So if you have a look very closely, you may be able to see some initials there. Obviously, those are the initials of our various regulars on the show. So when they arrive, I can press a button and it just says good morning to them, usually with their nickname and that kind of thing. It's not a big deal, you know, and I could quite happily type good morning, Dan, good morning, Ken, good morning, Jim. It's not exactly hard. But that thing is a godsend. I mean, I've pre-programmed it with a bunch of the websites that I visit most often. So rather than calling up, for example, Substack, I press a button, Substack appears on my screen. Keep that in mind when you watch this. See, there's a kind of driver aid I can really get behind. What do you make of that? You people that are driving machines, what do you make of that? Would it be nice to be able to press a button and just get the machine to repeat those things that you do most often, much as I do on my Stream Deck? I'd love to hear from you. While you're thinking about that and mulling it over, I'm going to play this because we're going back to Bauma in just a moment with Gehl. It's a good point, Dan. He says that click and dig, it'll make operators lazy or more relaxed or more productive. I think it's a viewpoint thing. As I say, I mean, yes, I could quite actively type hello to everyone as they arrive on the show, but I've chosen to do the shortcut because then I can concentrate on other things. Think about that. Taking it from a wheel loader point of view, if your role basically as the wheel loader operator is purely to approach the pile in the most efficacious, productive way, you choose the bit where you're likely to get the biggest bite, and then the machine actually takes care of the scoop element. Scoop. I sound like such a noob. You get the idea. The dig and crowd and everything. You know what I'm talking about. If you could concentrate on just getting the machine in the right place and let the machine take care of the rest. No, I'm a fan. I must say. Dan says wouldn't be my cup of tea. I understand that. Jim says no. I just want autonomous dumpers and rollers to be on site so I can just work on my own. Yeah, but funny enough, we are talking about autonomous dump trucks a bit in the morning monologue. Where do you draw the line? And I realise that's a very personal thing. You want to work on your own, autonomous dumpers and stuff. Maybe the dumper or the dump truck drivers would be quite happily if you weren't there anymore, Jim, and they could just pull up in the same place every single time, and an autonomous machine would load them. How do you feel about that? We'll come back to all that. Anyway, it is time for our revisit to Bauma, and we're doing it with Gehl. Just to fill you in, Gehl these days is part of the Manitou group. We did a couple of films with Manitou, but right next door was the Gehl stand, and we paid them a visit too.
We're here today at Bauma 2025 in Munich, Germany, and I'd like to give you a quick snapshot of some of the best things about our VT275 compact track loader. We have our patented ideal open easy access door, which allows the operator to use the machine with the door open so he can speak with people around the job site, or closed when weather permits. On all of Gehl's medium frame compact track loaders, you'll now find a cab that's 27% larger than its previous models. We have pilot-operated hydraulic joysticks, and they move with the seat, which is a Manitou exclusive when it comes to pilot operating controls. On the outside of our medium frame loaders, you'll find another innovative feature, one of the industry's only forward sloping roof. To minimize the cross section that you have in front of you when you're dumping into trucks, our lift arm, you'll notice that it slopes away from the machine. That provides better visibility. Patented Ideal Tracks hydraulic track tensioning system. Whenever the machine is turned on, the tracks are tensioned to the proper tension, eliminating the need for daily maintenance. When the machine is not in use, that tension is relieved, extending your track life to up to 15% or more. Inside the engine compartment of our medium frame loaders, you're going to find the industry's most serviceable machine, as well as our cab tips up 35 degrees, giving you access to anything on the front side of the engine. So that's a wrap for now from the Gehl booth at Bauma 2025. If you'd like more details, please check out our website, gehl.com.
I think there's some very, very sensible bits and pieces on that. Really impressed with that. Dan, however, says that's good, but that split screen would do my nutting, as your eye will be hitting that point. I didn't see exactly where it came. I thought you were looking over it, but maybe but I'll have another look. Jim Turner, going back to the talk about autonomy and stuff. That sound, but autonomous dumpers will probably come first. You're probably right. Gary Muirhead has just arrived. Good morning. Sorry I'm late. Have I missed all the free money and dancing girls? Well, listen, Gary, there was so much money, so many dancing girls. I mean, this office isn't particularly big. Rammed it was with naked females in my dreams. Good morning, Gary. Thank you for joining us. You're here just in time for my morning monologue, which is the bit where most people go to sleep, actually. So let me just very quickly say, no show on Monday because it is a bank holiday. Have a long weekend. You don't have to look at my ugly mug for a whole day. So that's about it for the main part of today's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around, do please stay safe. Have a good weekend too. Look after yourself, your family, your friends and your colleagues, and I hope to see you again very soon. Tuesday would be ideal. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I will be back in just a moment with kind of a rambling, bit of a my morning monologue today rambles so much it takes in Australia, even though it's got nothing to do with Australia whatsoever. Back after this. We live in an age of instant gratification. 280 character posts on Twitter, or X as we now call it. Short form vertical videos that barely register as they flicker across our retinas. Global news reduced to political sound bites and clickbait headlines. I read just such a headline yesterday. It came out of Australia and it stopped me in my tracks. BHP says the return of unions is the definition of unproductive. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar, BHP is a mining giant. In this instance, they're actually talking about extracting iron ore in Western Australia. They know a thing or two about productivity. Australian mines, as you saw earlier in the show, are finely tuned machines, extracting as much as possible for as little as possible. Productivity is their middle name. It's in their DNA. So when the world's biggest mining company starts publicly fretting about a potential loss of productivity, people pay attention. But here's the thing. There's more to this story than a single line in a press release. According to reports, BHP says the outcome of union attempts to regain a foothold in the iron ore industry will influence whether it triggers a potential multi-billion-dollar investment. BHP's CEO, Mike Henry, claims that any dent in productivity would make it harder to justify investing in Western Australia. Now, at this point, and I'm including myself here, at this point, most readers probably sighed and thought, yeah, typical bloody unions, slowing everything down again. That's certainly the tone of the article, which frames the story as unions threatening efficiency, shaking the system, and generally being a nuisance. What it doesn't do is explain how or why the return of a union might undermine productivity. If it meant workers taking extended breaks to attend union meetings or spending hours at negotiation tables, maybe BHP has a point. But even that is simplistic. Unions are more than meeting rooms and wage disputes. For a union to reappear after decades of absence, there must surely be a reason, a grievance, a need. Maybe workers are no longer content with their conditions. Maybe they're tired of silence. Maybe they feel like they're machines themselves, replaceable, voiceless, and spent. Let's not forget that BHP is a pioneer in autonomous mining. The company operates more than 40 driverless mining trucks in Western Australia alone. While those machines are maintained by humans, they've still taken 40 jobs off the books. And if they run those trucks on double shifts, that's 80 human jobs replaced in the name of efficiency. The very notion of productivity then has become a loaded term. It's a synonym for doing more with less. And yes, apparently sometimes that means doing more with less people. Now, all of this probably seems a world away in Australia, but it should hit home for those of us in the demolition and construction industry right here in the UK, because we're not far behind. In our world too, productivity is everything. Do more, do it quicker, do it cheaper, repeat. Autonomous machines are not science fiction. They're lurking just beyond the horizon. Already here in some places, and much like in mining, we too have a vacuum where workers' voices used to be. There are no unions with teeth, no mass representation, just individuals navigating an industry that chews people up and spits them out again. Now, let me be clear here. I'm not waving a union banner. I've been a member of 2 unions in my life, and I left both of them under a cloud. But let me ask you this. Would so many skilled workers have been forced out of secure, permanent employment and into agency work or zero-hour contracts if there was a strong union standing behind them? Would the epidemic of mental health issues in our sector be allowed to fester and go unaddressed if thousands of voices were channeled through a single, powerful entity? Would safety be sidelined in the name of speed if someone had the authority to say no more? This isn't a call for the rebirth of old school unions with their bureaucracy, infighting, and trademark arrogance. That model may no longer fit the modern world. But the need for representation, for a collective voice, is surely more urgent than ever. Because the truth is, we're seeing direct employment slowly being eroded, swept away in pursuit of flexibility. We're watching health and safety regulations treated as checkboxes rather than lifelines. And we're already seeing jobs begin to disappear in the name of efficiency and progress. And no one is speaking up. No one is raising the alarm on behalf of the men and women who show up before dawn, work in the mud, the dust, the noise, and the danger, who build the world and then tear it back down again. We often celebrate the machines, the technology, the innovation, but those machines don't build, people do. Machines don't mentor the apprentice or watch your back when a wall buckles. Machines don't call your family if something goes wrong. And yet machines are getting louder in our industry, not in sound, but in presence. Meanwhile, the humans around them are growing quieter, fewer, more disposable, and more afraid to speak. Because here's the hard truth. In the pursuit of productivity, people have become a problem to be solved, a cost to be cut, an inefficiency to be streamlined. So when the machines do start replacing jobs, your job or your mate's job, who will speak for you? Will it be the HR rep whose bonus depends on cost savings? Will it be the equipment supplier selling the robot that replaces you? Will it be the government department run by someone who's never set foot on a site? Or will there be silence? Because that's what we've got now. Silence. Silence on suicide, on burnout, on broken backs and missed birthdays and lives shortened by an industry that measures time in billable hours. If unions can no longer provide that balance, then we need something else that can. Because right now, we have nothing, and the silence is deafening. So the next time you see a headline like BHP's "The Return of Unions is the Definition of Unproductive," take a moment, not to get angry, not to shout, just to think. Think about what productivity really means. Think about who gets to define it. Think about what we've already lost in the name of progress, and what more might be lost if no one asks those hard questions. And maybe wonder who's left to ask those questions. Now, that's the end of the monologue. Excuse me. I don't want to overstate things, and I certainly don't want to draw comparisons with the victims of Nazi Germany. But when I was writing that, I was reminded of there's a poem. It's been doing the rounds quite a bit recently, but what with Gaza and Ukraine and everything else, and all that's going on politically in America. The poem is called "First They Came." First they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Think about that. Think about that. First, they pushed people into self-employment. I didn't speak out because I was self-employed. I was still employed. Then they worked people so hard that some were injured or killed, and I didn't speak out because I was okay. And then they came for my job. There was no one left to speak out for me. Have I overstated things? Am I getting carried away? Am I just a miserable old sod? Who the hell knows? Let's go back to the chat. Let's have a look what we got here. Going back to what upsets you, what makes your blood boil, phrases that make your blood boil. Gary Muirhead, I'm sure everyone can relate to that. It's not my job. Yeah, right with you there. Let's have a look. Right, where are we? I've had a herd of lorries to load and a phone. Was the machine? Chris, you won, mate. You won. It was the Mustang 220. You were absolutely on the money. And he says now he's lost the set. It's a great morning, isn't it? My mistake. The phone was frozen. Good Lord. Dan says, I think a union may be of some assistance with the conditions in which we are used and abused and treated like dogs and thrown out in a heartbeat. Yeah, listen, I'm not convinced. I know we're talking about Australia there. I'm not convinced there is room for an old school, old style union anymore. I don't think that's where we are as a society or as an industry anymore. But think about the imbalance. I'm going to take a wild stab here. How many construction companies are there in the UK? Let's say there's 50,000, just off the top of my head, 50,000. So there's, in all likelihood, there's 50,000 managing directors, probably 50,000 finance directors, quite possibly 50,000 CEOs. This industry has 2.5 million employees. Now, those, regardless of whether they're in demolition, construction, waste, quarrying, mining, whatever it might be, those company owners, MDs, CEOs get together in their little clubs and associations and stuff, and they get to set the agenda. Where do we do that? Where do the workers get to say, yeah, hang on a minute, hang on a bloody minute. I can't say I'm keen about that. I had a case when I was back in employment. I was there when computerization first took hold. When I first started on Contract Journal, I had a manual typewriter. And somebody came along and said, would you like a laptop computer? Now, a laptop computer back then weighed about as much as I do now. It was called a portable computer, but it was portable in the way that a Ford Escort is portable. Weighed a ton, so not exactly ideal. But I did work from home from time to time. And I thought, well, this is a good opportunity for me to do that. Well, the union then stepped in and said, you don't want to be doing that because, that will mean you're working at weekends, which you're not being paid to do. And the bigger concern is if you are doing this, rather than your words going through somebody called a typesetter and being put on a page, you are basically bypassing the typesetter and going straight onto, the print software. As a result of which, your acceptance of that laptop will basically eliminate the need and the job of the typesetter. Being the selfish kind of twat that I was when I was 20, I said, oh, sod that, I'm taking the computer, and I quit the union. As a result, not just me, loads and loads of people did it, literally thousands of people did it in the company I was working for. But as a result, typesetters did go away. I have their metaphorical blood on my hands, me and, as I say, thousands of other people. If we were talking about this earlier, we were talking about, Jim's site where he was talking about working on his own and having autonomous haulers. If you were offered that, Jim, and listen, I don't care which way you come down on this. If you were offered that today, somebody came along and said, we can give you autonomous dumpers or autonomous dump trucks, whatever it might be. They will make your site more efficient. You won't have to speak to people, which, some people might see as a benefit. And at the same time, with all that's going on, those half a dozen guys that are driving the dumpers at the moment, they're going to be on the dole. Now, you as an individual might say, oh, fuck them. Yeah, listen, I'm looking after number one. I want to be as productive as I can so that I can get home on time and do what I want to do. You might do that. And then, you're perfectly justified in doing that. But those half a dozen guys who are just on the verge of losing their job to a silent, autonomous assassin of an autonomous machine, who speaks for them? Who goes to the boss and says, hang on a minute, you can't sack 6 of us just because Jim's being a bit of a tit? Who speaks for them? I want to go back to the chat right now. Let's have a look. Jim says, machines have always taken the human element out of a task, so it's not a surprise at all. And anyone bitches about it must be a few. Unions are generally shit-stirring people. Yes, they are. Which, again, goes back to precisely the reason that I actually quit. They said a lot, but they didn't do a lot. And a lot of what they did, in my experience, kind of got in the way of progress. I fully accept that. And maybe, bearing in mind, I've not been in a union for 35 years, 36 years, actually. In that time, obviously, we've largely lost a lot of the unions, the mining union, and I was in a publishing or print union. But maybe during that absence, we should have looked at, okay, unions don't work. Maybe it shouldn't be the socialist-leaning brother this and brother that and everybody out. And maybe that's not the case. But certainly mass representation surely has a place, doesn't it? If somebody came along to Jim's site, to Ken's site, to Gary's site, to Dan's site, and said, from here on in, we want you to work left-handed. We're going to change the controls of all these machines so you work left-handed, just because we feel like it. You as an individual saying, hang on, we can't do that. Tough, get over it. But if 10 of you said it, if 20, if 1,000 of you said it, then maybe you might have some opportunity. I don't know where I got left-handed from, but maybe you would have an opportunity to actually say, back the fuck up a second. Let's have a chat about this. But acting as individuals, you do not have that opportunity anymore. Dan says, I think if the unions came back, there would be could be changes drastically needed. Too many favoritisms, no guaranteed employment. Self-employment is bollocks. That, I've got to be honest with you, that is one of my biggest gripes I'm not a fan of the fact that people are killed and maimed in demolition and construction. I'm not keen on the fact that we have a mental health crisis that leads some people to suicide. But I do think that right there is one of the biggest issues. I've started the same sentence so many times on this show. I'm starting to get on my own nerves. But there was a time when everybody in this industry was directly employed. You worked for a major contractor or a subcontractor, or whatever it might be. And they decided somewhere along the line, no, sod this. We know that this industry goes up and goes down. We don't want the cost and the hassle of redundancy payments every time the industry takes a nosedive. So what we'll do, we'll push everybody into self-employment, either direct self-employment or through an agency. They're no longer on our books. We don't have to pay them sick pay. We don't have to pay them holiday pay. We don't have to pay their national insurance. We can fuck them the hell off and pick them up and put them down as we like. And the one thing I would say, which is probably pro-union, if we'd have had a stronger union representation when that first started to happen, I do not believe it would have happened at all. I do honestly think that a union would have dug its heels in and said, absolutely 100% not. Because what have you got now? You've got a situation. I mean, I've lost count, and this is no reflection on Dan whatsoever, but I've genuinely lost count of how many jobs he has had since he started watching this show. This show is 5 and a bit years old. He must have been through a dozen jobs, not because he's a rabble-rouser, not because he's rolling machines over, but because because the system allows him to be picked up and put down. If his face doesn't fit, which has happened from time to time, they make it very clear that his face doesn't fit, and he is gently urged towards the exit. And that is happening up and down the country, not just with Dan, but with hundreds of thousands of working men and women. If your face doesn't fit, you can be urged out. If there were mass representation of the industry's workers, those with the dirt under their fingernails, that would not be permitted any longer. Gary says, never trusted the union. We tried to get Hydrex accountable for their actions using the UCAT union, but they never did anything. Apart from union dues, Hydrex's response was, we don't recognise unions. That never used to be the case. That whole thing. And it kind of reminds me of exactly what we've got right now in America. You've got the judicial part of the American government saying you cannot deport these people, you can't do this, you can't do that. And Donald Trump and his cohorts are saying, fucking watch us. Back in the day, I caught the tail end of union strength at, the mid or the early to mid 80s. And at that time, there was no, we don't recognize unions. You recognize unions because if you didn't, your fucking workers weren't in work. They were out on a picket line outside your front door. You had no option but to recognize them. And I think the other thing, and I'm going to keep reiterating this until I'm blue in the face, I don't necessarily think a union is the answer. But this isn't just a case of individuals. For example, if, let's say Gary, because Gary's on the screen right now. So imagine his current employer changed something about his working practice. I don't know, knocked his wages back, demanded that he work a 12-hour day for 10 hours money or whatever it might be, just something that clearly went above and beyond that which he should do. Now, Gary could stand up and say to the management, I'm not happy with that. Gary can be ignored. Now, maybe there's a dozen guys on his site, and maybe the dozen say, no, we're not happy about that. That's not fair to Gary. And the management might still say, oh, we don't care. Get on with it. Never mind you, Gary, and your 11 mates. Get on with it. But what about if the site just down the road did the same? What about if the site in Newcastle and Leicester and Leeds and Birmingham and London and Bristol all said, you're treating Gary really fucking badly and we're not going to stand for it? You've got a different conversation going on right there. But as it stands at the moment, individuals can be picked off. Picked off literally in, pushed out of employment, but also, we're going to change the rules. We employed you on this basis. We're changing it to this basis. Get over it. And there's nobody to speak up for you. Let's have a look. Jim says, yes, I take it. And I'd want a rise for having multiple machines and the dumpers to look after. It's fair comment. But you surely you would see, the guys that you've just sacked off as a result of your desire to be alone, surely they'd have a good reason to go back to the management and say, hang on a minute, that's not fair. I know your site is now more efficient, but you are bending to the whim of Beardy Jim, and you're making us unemployed. I'm not standing for that. MV Kelly sack hundreds of men every winter. Fine you for idling for more than 30 minutes a month too. Yeah, there you are. I think a modernised union. I'm thinking that's to sort out the bullshit in the construction industry. Yeah, I wonder. And I'm not going to dwell on that poem because obviously that poem was all about Nazi Germany and the way they gradually picked off various types of people. But think about 10, 20, 30 years hence. Now, I know all of us will be retired by then and we won't have to worry about it. But, they came for your jobs and pushed you into self-employment, and we didn't speak out because at the time you were employed. And, people are maimed and killed on demolition and construction sites, 30, 40, 50 a year in the UK alone. And, we all clutch our pearls to our chest and say that's terrible. But we don't speak out because you're still living and breathing and you're fine. And that apathy, that silent acceptance, when the day comes that somebody actually comes for your job, Jim, your job, Dan, Gary, Ken, Dan, when they come for your job, who will be left to say, hold the fuck on, just hold on while we have a good bloody chat about this, because we're not happy about Dan losing his job. And by that time, there'll be nobody left to speak for you. Jim Turner says, I love being a subby. Dan says, no one has your back now either. You accept the money given, or I'll get a guy to do it cheaper. Yeah, even that. Now, I realise this is a cyclical industry, and I realise that prices go up and down and so on down the line. And I'm not, I'm not naive enough to believe that wages should only ever go up. When times get hard, when workloads diminish, I fully understand. I'm not happy about it, but I fully understand the notion of companies cutting back, either cutting back on the amount they're willing to pay or the amount of people they're willing to employ. I fully understand that. But how is it that you've got a situation where, here is, let's say, the rate for this job is £25 an hour, but we found somebody that will do it for 18. So you've got your card that you quite possibly be paid for. You've got all your experience. You've got all of that knowledge, but we've got somebody who knows fuck all who's going to take your job, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just saying. Chris Ford says unions have their place, but sometimes misuse their power. That you only need a radical in charge, and then the fun begins. There's very few winners. Yeah, and listen, I've watched it over the years, and I'm kind of the belief that I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy at the head of the rail union did seem to quite enjoy being on the telly a lot. Now, I'm sure he's doing his level best for the rail union employees. But there is that temptation to, Arthur Scargill, back in the National Union of Mine Workers, kind of became a celebrity. Funnily enough, I was watching an old Parkinson the other day because I was watching an interview with Ian Dury, and Arthur Scargill was on there. Union leader as celebrity. Not a fan of that. But he was the only guy that ever, to a degree, partly successfully, faced down Margaret Thatcher. It wasn't pretty, and in fact, it was really fucking unpleasant. I lived through it. But at least he had the balls to stand up and say, hang on a minute, just hold the fucking hell on. Let's have a look. What we've got here. Chris Ford. Question day, better late than never. I'll be with you shortly. Yeah. Funnily enough, I don't know if anybody's done this. You can, when your phone rings, and I don't know about yours, but mine is pre-programmed with a bunch of answers. I've programmed a few. Like I've got one that's, if my phone rings during the show, I can press a button and it sends back a message. Can't talk at the moment. I'm broadcasting. I realise that's very peculiar to me, which is why I programmed it. But there are some where you get a phone call, you can say, can't talk now, but I'm on my way. It happens so often. People are left in the lurch so often that it's pre-programmed into your phone. Dan says, if we were to start a union, it would have to be men, women, actually work in the industry that will make a difference. I think not just office suits who don't have a clue. I think you're right. I think you're right. And the crazy thing is, thank you very much indeed, Dan. It is Mick Lynch who is head of our rail workers union. Think about this. Think about the potential power that you guys could wield, and I realise when you wield power, you know, it can be a force for good, it can be a force for evil, and I accept that. But imagine if you're on HS2 and they introduce some really ridiculous working practice. They cut your wages, remove holiday pay, whatever it is they've done. And you, en masse, all of those guys guys and girls with bums on seats, joysticks in their hands, say, all right, you operate them then. And you'll just get off your machines and bugger off home. Get their attention, wouldn't it? But as it stands today, they will do that, and they might fire one guy who takes umbrage, and everybody else is not a problem at all. We'll do that. We'll accept what you're telling us to do, and there's nobody to speak up for them. Chris Ford says, would take automation of some of my work any day. It can be hard, laborious work at the best of times. But I don't think I'm kind of encouraged by the fact that some manufacturers, and I would single out Bobcat on this. Bobcat were the first manufacturer that I'm aware of that spoke about their concerns for the ethics of autonomy. We already know, we've seen on this show and on YouTube and at ConExpo and Bauma and Intermat, we already know that it is perfectly possible for a machine to be automated, to dig autonomously, to trench autonomously, to load autonomously, to carry autonomously. We know that exists. What we haven't figured out yet is how that will actually impact the workforce. For those of you that haven't read it, Echoes of Dust, my little work of fiction, was about precisely that. The day the machines came and everybody was just told, on your way. Now, as it stands at the moment, autonomous machines are on the horizon. They're just peeking their eyes above the horizon. We're just about to see them. And over here, we're beavering away feverishly because that's what we do. There will come a time when employers and the industry at large will have the opportunity to decide, do we go left with people or do we go right with machines? Do we go left with people that in many instances are unreliable, in many instances turn up hungover or drunk or high, who require holiday pay and sick pay, who will require maternity or paternity leave? Or do we go right and go with machines that require none of that? Now, the temptation, quite clearly, the temptation will say, let's turn right. As it stands today, there is nobody stood at that crossroads saying, before you go right, let's have a chat about the people to the left. Because what we're talking about here potentially is mass unemployment. I remember a time when, the darkest days of British recession, when UK unemployment topped 3 million. I don't know what it is at the moment, way less than that, I would imagine. But bearing in mind that the construction industry employs 2.5 million people, I realise this will be a slow process. I'm doing this for journalistic effect, effectively. But if we reach that crossroad, go left with people, go right with machines, and the industry as a whole decides to go right, we have just recreated the worst unemployment crisis in British history with one industry. And don't let's forget, this isn't one industry alone. Obviously, this show and all our discussions are always about demolition and construction because that's where we live. But this is an issue that's happening across industry as a whole. You think about, there was a time when you'd look to a Morgan or a Rolls Royce as the very epitome of hand-built excellence. Who the fuck wants a hand-built car now? I don't want to wait 6 months, 2 years, 5 years for a hand-built car. I want something that's built by robots. Think about all the people that were left unemployed as a result of my desire to get my hands on a car a bit more quickly. Jim Turner says it's not a case of fair or not. A job is not guaranteed for life. People are there to be used just like machines. We wouldn't service and run a machine that we don't need. So why employ people we don't need anymore? It's a good point, but there are no ethical considerations with machines. If you run a machine into the ground, well, you should think long and hard about yourself, maybe give your head a wobble, but it's your choice. But if your actions are impacting upon a fellow human being's ability to earn money, to feed their family, and so on, there should surely be pause. Just long enough to, I realise I could be a smidge more productive, but am I willing, would I be able to sleep nights if I said to all 100, 200, 5,000 people that I employ, sorry lads, we're going the machine route? As it stands at the moment, that decision could be made, and Jim is absolutely right. We do live in a very commercial world. That decision could be made overnight, and nobody at all would ever bat an eyelid. We need somebody to bat eyelids on our behalf, which we don't have at the moment. Online, people all talk about the problems on site, but then they're sacked. No one stands up, says I'm gone too, or picket at the gates like nurses. Yeah. There's the problem. One of the things that we used to find with the old print unions, when I was a member of the National Union of Journalists, we were often approached being told about what was happening in other parts. I mean, I was working in business to business. I was working in magazines, weekly, bi-weekly, quarterly magazines, sometimes, magazines, glossy magazines. But as we were all members of the National Union of Journalists, we would actually get, wasn't even an email, it was often a letter or a fax or a telex that said, this is happening in, I don't know, the Daily Mirror or the Sun or the Times or the Observer. Your brother journalists, and I union speak, your brother journalists are being mistreated like this. Are you willing to stand up for your fellow brother journalists? Sometimes I'd look at it and go, it's their own bloody fault. They're pushing their bloody luck anyway. Other times I think, that really ain't right. I've been on a picket line or two in my time, walked off a few as well. But who is there to speak now? As Dan has rightly said, if you were sacked today in completely unfair circumstances, yes, you might be able to take it to a tribunal 3 months, 6 months, 2 years down the line. Yes, you might get a bit of a payout. But what about today? What about tomorrow? What about your fellow workers, not just on your site, but on neighbouring sites across the country? What about them standing up and saying, that's not right. What you've just done to Dan there is bang out of order. Get it sorted. Chris Ford says Arthur Scargill was right with that, with what he said, but went the wrong way about it. I can't stand it. No, me either. The writing was on the wall. If it happened then, it would have happened now. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're from day one. Obviously, he was quite clearly fighting a losing battle. But the very fact that, and bearing in mind how the end of the mines impacted, particularly in places like Wales, where you've got entire villages that are, father or grandfather, father, son, all employed by that mine, underground or overground, in the office or in the mine itself. All of those people, they basically, that village exists purely because that mine exists. And the very fact that, the mining companies could say, well, these things aren't productive anymore. And I understand that, from a commercial standpoint, I understand that. But to be able to rip the guts out of entire communities without anyone standing up for them, I'd like to think, even though we have no real powerful unions anymore, I'd like to think that if somebody suggested that now, we would stand up and fight. Would we? If somebody took away I don't know what your big local employers are. I'm not entirely sure. I know what my big local employers are. But if there was a particularly big local employer who said, we're going fully automated, or we're going to ship our entire production facility over to Korea, as a result, 500, 2,000, 5,000 people here are going to lose their jobs. And then think about the knock-on effect. I mean, I've seen that Dan has said something about cafes as well. If you take a mine or a major employer out of a village or a town, it's not just those employees. You think about, on your way to work, you stop off at the petrol station, you top your car up with petrol. Well, that petrol station is probably going out of business as well because there's nobody using it anymore. There's a cafe just down the road where some of the workers pop in and have a bacon roll on their way to work. Well, that's gone too because nobody's eating the bacon rolls. There's nobody buying the local newspaper. There's nobody buying the cigarettes. There's nobody buying their energy drinks. And so and nobody getting their hair cut. And so it might be a loss of 5,000 jobs. It could end up quite easily being a loss of 10,000 jobs. And nobody stands up and says, just hang on a minute. Jim Turner says, business is there to make money. It isn't charity work. It isn't charity work, but surely there should be consideration for those that make that happen. We're told regularly that our people, our workers, are our greatest asset. Surely you owe some consideration to your greatest asset. Chris Ford says, never seen a machine that doesn't break down. I've owned plenty. True enough. An autonomous machine, what will happen? There'll be more people on benefits, and the country won't be able to support the influx of people on benefits. Yeah. There's the wider thing. I mean, I'm not going to do the Frankie Goes to Hollywood song because you're bored with it. But there is this, in the common age of automation where people eventually might work 10 or 20 hours a day, a week rather, and so on down the line. But I'm thinking about this from an ethical standpoint. This notion of people being unemployed. But it does go wider than that. What is the impact on, as Dan rightly said, the unemployment situation? And the guy I had lunch with yesterday, he retired about 6 weeks ago. And I said, how's retirement? And he said, well, the garden looks nice. And, I played a bit of golf and done a bit of this and a bit of that and whatever. He said, but I really, really struggle not having structure. This is a guy that used to be out of the house at 6:30 in the morning. Probably didn't get back much before about 7:30 at night. Worked for the BBC and Sky and people like that over the years. But that's all gone. All of that structure is gone. I mean, I met him yesterday at noon. He didn't get up until 9:15. Now, there's part of me that was envious. Who doesn't like a lie-in? But imagine when you wake up and, I wake up of a morning now and I think, okay, the show is partly ready. I've got to write this, I've got to write that. I've got to put that video there and that video there, sort the lighting out, sort the sound out, put the lights on, and I do that at 7:30 without fail. And even if I'm not doing a show, I'll be awake at 7:30 and my mind will be going over that kind of thing. Imagine how you'd feel if all that was taken away. You wake up, you open your eyes and think, what should I do today? I personally would struggle with that. And I'd love to say, I'd wake up every morning and think, what should I do? I know I'll go fishing. But even that, even as much as I love fishing, I think after a couple of weeks, it kind of needs something else. Because this will impact the benefit system, private renters, and I think there'll be a major problem. Yeah, I agree. Again, I go back to 2 points. This isn't going to be a problem for us. This might not even be a problem for our children, but it could well be a problem for our children's children. And that poem, first they came for. Well, first they came for, first they came for our employment status, and we said nothing. And maybe they don't come for us, and maybe they don't come for our jobs, but they might come for your grandchildren's jobs. And because we kept our heads down, they could quite easily take your grandchildren's jobs. I'm a see. As soon as anybody starts to quote UB40 on the show, the bond, Chris, between you and I just grew stronger. I am a 1 in 10, just a number on a list, a statistical reminder of a world that doesn't care. Ali Campbell, God bless you, sir. Well done, Chris. Top work, top work. Local cafes shutting down local shops. Yeah, absolutely. See, there's another point. Would suicide rates increase as people can't afford to live? Afford to live, I think, would be a big one. But what about also the loss of purpose? Again, I'm not trying to flog my book here. I can't flog it. It's free. It's over on buymeacoffee.com. It's free. Echoes of Dust. That is precisely it. As much as I hate the notion, if somebody says to me, you introduce yourself to somebody. Hi, I'm Mark. What do you do, Mark? And you describe yourself by a job. No, in absolute truth, the job just basically funds what I really am. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a West Ham supporter, and so on down the line. But you are, like it or not, you are largely defined by the job you do. Imagine if somebody just ripped that rug out from under you. What do you do? Nothing really. What do you, where is your purpose? I mean, I always say this, if I won the lottery, which would be a bit of a shock because I don't do the lottery, but if I won the lottery tomorrow, chances are I would still get out of bed in the morning and write, because that's my thing. That, Jim, you are a man that works with your hands. You imagine somebody said, you don't have to do that anymore. That's it. That's done. Now, I realize you could do it on your own property and you go and do your machine development, but imagine that. Imagine where the structure of your day and the thing that defines you as a human being, as a man or as a woman, is taken away. Where does that leave you? And I do think suicide rate, I think out of lack of cash, but also lack of purpose, I think you're absolutely right. Homelessness will increase too. Mental problems, yeah, totally. And as I say, hats off to the likes of Bobcat that are considering the ethical considerations. But is that going to stop anyone? The very fact that there are autonomous machines in existence, and I don't like to single out BHP because they're not unique, but they're talking about loss of productivity and how it might impact their investment plans. But they have done away with at least 40 workers by making their mine trucks autonomous. Chances are they're running double, if not triple shifts. So they've done away with 80 or 120 people without batting an eyelid, all while the unions have been absent from the Western Australia mining industry. Would that be the case today if those unions had survived? Scarborough spent too much time on the wrong side of the curtain. I agree. Dan Cullen says, I just hear they're starting a gang. They're starting a gang. That's why I've been told last week. Not sure what that's about. Capitalism brings progress. That means chasing money and profit. If we have communism, we will eventually end up driving a shovel, pick, or barrow. Again, and I think that's probably one of my biggest concerns with referring to this as this mass representation as a union, because as soon as you say union, it does have its whole socialist, left-leaning, communist connotations, and I don't believe that is the way today. I mean, even the notion of going into dark scout huts to have union meetings, it just feels outdated, outmoded. But what about a mass representation for the digital age? Where where the industry's workers could, a forum where the industry's workers could meet, potentially online, and express their concerns and to develop ideas on how problems could be fixed. Because we do that as workers anyway. How we're going to take down that building. Well, I think we should do this. Oh, okay. So the input of the guy behind the levers or the lady behind the levers is valued. When you get onto a house building site, you take with you your experience from a previous job, and that kind of influences the way in which you're going to approach that job. We don't have that opportunity to express our hopes and fears, our concerns and aspirations when it comes to our own employment. Dan says, exactly, what would your life be worth if you've got no structure, no purpose? If you're a single person, you think I'd not be missed? Yeah. My greatest fear, my greatest fear is loneliness, but I think a lack of significance would be a real problem to deal with. I don't think, if I was told tomorrow, you may never write again. Listen, I'm not threatening to throw myself off a building, but I actually don't know how I would survive not being able to do the thing that makes me tick. Listen, I'm going to use Jim as an example. I'm sure Jim, because of the way he is, I'm sure Jim is one of those people that sees a problem with a machine or a problem on site as a challenge to be overcome, an opportunity to improve. We're doing that, but if we did that would affect that, and then that would be better. That's the way that's the way I believe Jim thinks. Here's how I think. When I see, like I did yesterday, I saw that headline about BHP. I saw a thing, and it wasn't a case of let me read. My brain said, let me write. I view everything through the lens of writing. I mean, I've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes now, but it all begins with the written word. If that was taken away from me, I am less than half a man. I can still function as a father and as a husband and everything else, although quite how I'd put food on the table, I'm not entirely sure. But my very purpose, my very reason for existing would have gone. Jim says, if I won the lottery, I'd still be doing the same thing I do now, just on a bigger scale. People lack imagination nowadays, and that probably adds to the amount of suicides. Most people are sheep. Funnily enough, and that's a good point to end on, because it is an hour and 20 minutes, most people are sheep. But have you noticed how we're no longer allowed to herd? See, this is why I write, because I can come up with bollocks like that. Yeah, we're not allowed to herd. So if you decide I'm going to go and shoot that sheep between the eyes, you can do that. Maybe if there was a few aggressive rams in there and they saw you approaching with a shotgun, maybe they'd stick up for their fellow sheep. I don't know how sheep work. I'm not a farmer, but you get the idea. Herd mentality. We've lost herd mentality. That'll do us, because I am now going at the point where I start comparing myself to a sheep. I've definitely lost the plot. So I'm going to go and love you and leave you. No show tomorrow. No show Sunday. No show Monday. But I've already written our thing for Tuesday. It's going to piss off quite a few people, and I'm good with that. I'll see you then. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the long break, assuming you're having one, and I'll be back on Tuesday. All the best.